Now looking at labour and the workers that are required in your business. So here's a bit of a history lesson for you actually. It's a funny section of the specification, but it's looking at the sectors of production, so primary, secondary, tertiary sectors of production, and how many people are employed in which sector and why we've had changes in the last, say, 100 years. So what do you need to know? You need to know what the primary, secondary, tertiary sector are. You need to be able to give examples of these sectors and what these types of jobs include. You need to be able to give reasons for the changes in these sectors in terms of the number of people employed in recent years. And you need to be able to evaluate which sector of production is most useful to the UK economy and UK businesses. So, primary sector of production, businesses that create or recover raw materials, so anything involving growing or cutting down or extraction, so farming, mining, fishing, those types of things. Secondary sector is your manufacturing side of the UK economy or any economy, so processing materials provided by the primary sector, so transforming those materials into products usually, taking the raw materials and producing tyres, or taking the iron ore and making it into iron, and then processing it again and again to make cars. And then the tertiary sector of production, they're not directly involved in the creation or extraction of raw materials or manufacturing, commonly known as the service sector of the economy, so teaching, nursing, consultancy, hairdressing, those types of activities. Overview of what we have in the UK, and this is not an exhaustive list. So coal, extracting minerals, water, gas and oil, forestry, fishing, and farming as well, kind of arable farming. But the interesting thing is that not all of these things take place all over the UK. Different areas are known for doing different types of primary sector production, as is the same with secondary sector production, so ceramics, clothing, drinks, paint, printing, steel production. Different sectors known for different areas of the country known for different sectors of the secondary sector. And then tertiary sector, retail, tourism, education, healthcare, banking. London very much known for its financial sector. Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson here. So over 100 years ago, so we're looking at 200 years ago, 150 years ago, most people were employed in the primary sector. We can see here very big proportion. So most people working on the land employed in those sectors. Whereas kind of 50 to 80 years ago, we had industrialization. During the kind of Victorian era, we started getting industrialization, people working in factories. So we have this growth in the secondary sector, more people entering the secondary sector for jobs. We have a decline in the primary sector, and we have growth in the tertiary as well. And then now we have a sector very much dominated by the tertiary sector. The primary sector only employs around 2% of the workforce. The tertiary sector is around about 74% of the workforce in the UK are employed in the tertiary sector, and a much smaller secondary sector than we had, say, 50 to 80 years ago. So this is a nice past paper question that was up a few years ago, and we can see the changes that have taken place in the pattern of employment over the last, well, this is from 2006, so we've actually had 10 years since this. It would be nice to get an updated graph, but this is a 10-year pattern that we can see. The numbers of people employed in the economy overall have increased, so either population growth or immigration, or a mix of the two. But we can see the greatest increases in the tertiary sector. Secondary sector, we've had a slight decline in the number of people employed, and the primary sector, it's kind of stayed stable, but it's obviously a very small amount of people employed in that sector. So what you need to understand is reasons for this type of decline and growth. So reasons for decline in the UK primary sector, I mean, this is more, I'm thinking more over the last 100 years. If we're watching something like Downton Abbey on a Sunday night, they obviously don't have the machinery and the tools that we have these days in farming. So better machinery means fewer people needed. This goes for the secondary sector as well. There's more automation these days. A lot of production in both of them have moved abroad in the primary sector and in the secondary sector as well. Production moved abroad, especially in clothes manufacturing, so cheaper wages abroad. Coal mining, lots of coal pits closed, declining coal consumption, so looking to more renewable sources of energy and just different sources of energy as well, nuclear energy as well, so coal mining not as much in demand. If we're looking at percentage wise, there's you know, although the primary sector has kind of stayed very stable, if we looked at it in terms of kind of pie charts, because we've had such growth in the tertiary sector, the percentage of people employed looks quite small, looks like it's declining, even though over the last 10 years we've had quite a stable amount of people employed in the primary sector. And also, you know, when we're thinking about this could be for both the secondary sector and primary sector, when we're thinking about people when they're at school, when they're at university, what they aspire to become, more people aspire to work in the tertiary sector. So it's maybe more attractive, higher wages in the tertiary sector on average, so people are moving into those sectors. However, in the secondary sector, we still have growth in the UK in the pharmaceutical areas and aerospace as well. So that's quite a big area that you can kind of look at and say that not every secondary sector area of production is declining. So why have we had such growth in the tertiary sector? Well, higher wages, as we've just mentioned. We've got a competitive advantage, I would say, in the global economy, especially for financial services, so insurance services, banking services. We've got an amazing financial sector in London and the City of London and Canary Wharf. We're very competitive on those types of aspects. More people aspire to tertiary sector jobs, and one of the reasons for the growth in the tertiary sector is generally over time, although we've had a bit of a blip over the last few years, but generally over time people's incomes increase, and what they tend to spend more on is secondary sector products and even more on tertiary sector products, so the entertainment industry, retailing, you know, shopping, clothing, those types of things. And then that encourages, okay, clothing may be made in India and China and Bangladesh and countries like that, but when we go to places like the Trafford Centre, the people that are employed there are mainly working in the tertiary sector. And so we have this growth in the need for shop assistants and people that work in restaurants, waiters, waitresses, those types of things, when they're not necessarily making the food, but they're serving, and it's the service sector of the economy. So we have growth in the demand for jobs there. Okay, so if we look at different countries, the more developed it is, the bigger their tertiary sector seems to be. So Brazil really going for this industrialization process, and Nepal not quite industrialized yet, so very much based on the primary sector of the economy. So industrialization means the secondary sector grows, and then we get this deindustrialization as the secondary sector declines a little bit, and you get a growth in the tertiary sector. I mean, that's a general pattern of change, but there are countries that, you know, are very developed, such as Germany, that have a really large secondary sector as well. So it doesn't always work like that. Okay, this is one of the hardest questions I think that have been set on a Welsh Board exam. Consider the view that the secondary sector is the most important sector of the UK economy. So how would we answer this? I'm just going to make some notes here so we can see the types of points that we'd put in. So first of all, I'd want to start off with, I'm just going to make this different colour. So I'd want to, not wanting to be a different colour, I'd want to start off with define the key terms. So we've got primary, secondary, tertiary. Oops, misspelled that one. Wow. Not wanting to. I always get that spelling wrong. Define those key terms, and I'd give some examples as well. Then I'd talk about arguments for the secondary sector being the most important. So thinking about, you can earn export revenue from the secondary sector. So that's much more easy to export and bring revenue into the country than the tertiary sector. It's also providing some of our providing for some of our basic needs. So housing, shelter, manufacturing of vehicles, so for transportation use. And then I would do some arguments, because it is a consider the view question, so we know we have to make it two-sided. We've got some arguments for the primary sector being important and the tertiary sector being important as well. Obviously, the tertiary sector employs the most people in the UK economy. It also generates the most towards GDP, so we could say that that's the most important. But the primary sector provides a lot of our basic needs, so food, arable farming, very much based, all based in the primary sector, and it's providing kind of key materials needed for the secondary sector. And also the secondary sector employ probably around, they generate maybe around 25% of the GDP in this country, so it's not as important as the tertiary sector. But one of the big things that I would argue right at the end is, what does it depend upon? Depends upon. So I would say, what does the term important actually mean? Does it mean important as in employs the most people? Because yeah, it doesn't employ the most people, but it still employs a lot of people. Does it mean that it provides essential products? Because we could say the tertiary sector, obviously there'll be essential products in there, such as education, but maybe the secondary sector provides more needs, and the tertiary sector provides more wants. You could link in a bit of the stuff that you learned at the beginning of the Unit 1 to this. And I would also question, depends upon the area of the UK. Going back to those maps that we had, and the sectors of production, the secondary sectors, the northwest, where I am, is not particularly known for its ceramic production. In the northwest, it's more towards the Midlands that are known for kind of ceramic production. So some areas are very reliant on, say, in the northwest we have a lot of call centres, so tertiary sector production. 100 years ago we were very much more reliant on the secondary sector in terms of kind of cotton manufacturing, but that's kind of disappeared and gone abroad these days. So very much we're reliant on the tertiary sector in this area, but there are going to be areas such as Swindon, which has a lot of manufacturing. It has a Toyota or a Nissan factory there, or maybe even Honda. I can't remember which company it is, but they employ a lot of people to put together cars in Swindon. And up in I think it's Gateshead as well, they employ lots of people in the secondary sector. And around Birmingham, when the secondary sector kind of disappeared with Rover, that was really harmful for the local area. And in Solihull, they still have what's it called, Jaguar Land Rover in that area that employ a lot of people around there, so it's very important to them. So you could question about the area that you're looking at. It's not going to be as important to the whole of the UK, but certain areas are very dependent on secondary sector production. Okay, so make sure you know the differences between primary, secondary, and tertiary, and you can give examples. And make sure you know the history behind the decline and the rise of certain areas. And make sure you can argue this. Try and make some notes where you're coming up with reasons for and against the secondary sector or any of the other sectors. It could be the tertiary sector that you have a question on being the most important or not the most important to the UK economy.